Snow buried Cedar Hollow in silence that night. Beneath the frozen bridge, two starving children found a woman bound and barely breathing, her mouth sealed with gray duct tape, a broken police radio flickering beside her in the dark. Across town, a lone officer and his German shepherd raced into the storm, chasing that fragile signal through the snow. What they uncovered would test courage, faith, and the last warmth left in a frozen town. If this story touches your heart, please like and subscribe to our channel to receive notifications for more stories of hope and humanity. Snow fell in thick, whispering sheets over Cedar Hollow, Montana. The river had frozen into a mirror of pale glass, and the wind howled through the steel ribs of the old bridge. Beneath that sound, the town seemed to sleep, wrapped in silence and frost. On the levee road, two small figures trudged forward, barely visible against the white storm. Their footprints vanished as soon as they were made. Ben Carter, 10 years old, walked ahead, shoulders hunched against the cold. His coat was too big for him, its torn sleeves flapping like flags. Dirt darkened his blonde hair, and his face, once soft, had hardened into something older than his years. Since their mother's death the previous winter, Ben had been both brother and parent. He was cautious, distrustful of strangers, and too proud to beg. Behind him followed Emma, 9, small with tangled auburn hair and eyes that still carried warmth where Ben's had lost it. She held onto her brother's sleeve like it was a lifeline, her breath puffing small clouds in the air. "Ben," she whispered, "my feet hurt." He didn't answer right away. He had learned that stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering things he didn't want to. They followed the frozen road along the river. The town lights shimmered faintly in the distance, a handful of gold coins scattered over the white valley. Emma's small boots squeaked with each step. "Maybe the diner's trash bins still have food," she murmured. Ben frowned. "We can't go near there. The man with the red hat saw us last week." He had the cautious tone of someone who'd already seen the world turn cruel. "We'll try the gas station instead." But even as he said it, he doubted there would be anything left. The storm had driven everyone indoors. The streets were empty, buried under snow and silence. The wind shifted. A strange smell drifted toward them, sharp, metallic, and wrong. Ben stopped. "You smell that?" Emma nodded, eyes wide. The scent grew stronger. Burned rubber, oil, something scorched and recent. They climbed the slope leading to the bridge. Through the snow haze, a blackened shape crouched on the embankment like a carcass. It was a vehicle, its metal frame twisted and smoking. The flames were gone, but heat still shimmered faintly from its ruins. Ben's stomach knotted. "We should go," he said quickly, but Emma was already staring past the wreck down toward the frozen river below. Under the bridge's arch, a dark form was half buried in snow. Emma squinted. "Ben, someone's down there." He wanted to say she was wrong, but when he followed her gaze, he saw it too. A person slumped against the concrete pillar, motionless. The thought of dead people always made Ben's throat close. It reminded him of their mother, of the night she stopped breathing in that shelter bed. "Come on," he said hoarsely. "We can't—" But Emma had already started sliding down the embankment, boots slipping on the ice. "Emma!" he shouted, panic cracking through his voice. Emma reached the figure first. It was a woman, bound at the wrists and ankles, duct tape over her mouth. Frost clung to her lashes. Her coat was torn, and blood had frozen into a dull crust on her sleeve. Yet, when Emma touched her hand, it twitched. "She's alive!" Emma gasped. Ben stumbled after her, nearly falling as he reached the bottom. The air smelled of smoke and iron. He knelt beside Emma, scanning the shadows. "Someone did this," he muttered. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He looked up at the bridge. The world above was just a blur of white. Whoever tied this woman could still be close. "We have to go," he said, voice trembling. "Now." But Emma shook her head. "We can't leave her." She tugged at the ropes around the woman's arms, but her fingers were too numb. Then, beside a patch of snow, something glinted. Emma crawled over and picked it up. A cracked police radio, half buried under ice. Her small hands trembled as she pressed the button. The speaker crackled, spitting static. She tried again, voice barely more than a whisper. "Help. Someone's hurt. Under the bridge." Silence. Then, faintly, a man's voice, distant and calm. "This is Cedar Hollow Dispatch. Identify your location." Emma's eyes widened. "Ben, it worked!" she cried. But she didn't know what to say next. She looked around helplessly. "The bridge," Ben whispered. "Tell them about the bridge." She pressed the button again, shouting against the wind. "The frozen bridge, the one by the river. Please, she's dying." Static filled the air. Then the voice again, firmer. "Copy that. Stay where you are. Help is on the way." Ben's heart thudded. Relief and fear twisted inside him. "They're coming," he murmured. But even as he said it, he looked up toward the ridge. Somewhere above, a shadow moved. Just for a second, too quick to be sure. His breath caught. "Emma," he whispered, "we have to leave before they come back." He didn't know who they were, but every instinct screamed to run. Emma hesitated, looking at the woman's pale face. "She'll die if we go." Ben swallowed hard. "She'll die if they find us, too." They climbed back up the slope, boots slipping in the ice. Halfway up, Ben reached down to pull Emma forward. She stumbled, gasping, snow in her hair. When they reached the top, she turned once more toward the river. The woman's body lay still beneath the bridge, the flicker of the broken radio light blinking like a heartbeat. "Ben," Emma said softly, "what if no one comes?" He didn't answer. The sirens were faint in the distance, ghostly against the wind. He squeezed her hand. "They'll come. I know they will." Behind them, the storm swallowed everything. The wreck, the bridge, the faint echo of hope in a dying woman's breath. And miles away, in a dimly lit patrol car, Officer Daniel Reed turned his head toward the radio on his dashboard. Daniel was 42, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair streaked with early gray. Years on the force had carved lines around his eyes, and the quiet weight of loss lived behind them. A scar cut along his jaw, the remnant of an explosion that had taken his partner 2 years before. Since then, Daniel spoke little and trusted even less, except for his dog, Shadow, a German shepherd trained for search and rescue. The dog rested beside him in the passenger seat, alert ears pricked at the sound of the weak signal that now crackled through the radio. "Under the bridge," the voice had said, young, frightened. Daniel adjusted the dial, his breath fogging in the cold car. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I'm picking up a distress signal, possible 1052 by the frozen bridge, requesting confirmation." The dispatcher's voice replied, steady. "Confirmed, Unit 12. Fire department notified. Proceed with caution." Daniel glanced at Shadow, who let out a low whine, sensing the tension. "Let's go, partner," he murmured. The German shepherd straightened, tail stiff, eyes sharp in the dim light. Daniel turned the wheel and headed into the storm. Snow whipped across the windshield as the patrol car sped down the empty road. Daniel's mind replayed the voice he'd heard, a child's voice, shaking, desperate. He thought of his daughter, gone since the divorce 5 years ago, and something inside him clenched. He pressed the accelerator harder. "Hold on," he muttered to the unknown caller. "We're coming." In the rearview mirror, the lights of Cedar Hollow faded into the snow, and only the sound of the siren answered back. The storm thickened as Officer Daniel Reed steered his patrol SUV through the mountain pass, wipers struggling against the curtain of snow. The headlights carved only a narrow path through the white chaos, revealing a world made of ice and silence. The radio signal had faded into static minutes ago, but he could still hear the faint echo of that frightened child's voice replaying in his mind. Small, desperate, trembling, His hands gripped the wheel tighter. Beside him sat Shadow, his German Shepherd partner, muscles tense beneath a coat of thick winter fur. The dog's dark eyes reflected the flashing red light from the dashboard, focused and alert. Shadow was 5 years old, trained for search, rescue, and scent tracking. But what set him apart wasn't his training, it was his instinct. He had saved Daniel's life once, 2 years earlier, when a drug raid went wrong and a gas line explosion turned a warehouse into an inferno. Daniel still carried the scar from that night along his jaw. Shadow carried a smaller one, hidden beneath the fur on his shoulder. Since then, the two were inseparable, each the other's only family. The dispatcher's voice crackled faintly in the radio. "Unit 12. Do you copy? Fire units 10 minutes out." Daniel pressed the button. "Copy that. I'm less than 2 clicks from the bridge." He glanced at Shadow. "Ready, boy?" The dog's ears twitched, a low whine escaping his throat, as if sensing the gravity in his partner's voice. Daniel smiled faintly, a rare thing for him these days. "Me too," he murmured. As the patrol car descended toward the frozen river, the beam of light from his headlights caught the outline of the steel bridge. Smoke still curled faintly from the blackened wreck of a vehicle at its edge. Daniel's pulse quickened. He killed the engine, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. The cold bit instantly into his skin, the kind that made breath turn solid. "Stay close," he ordered quietly. Shadow leapt out, paws sinking into the snow. His nose went to work immediately, nostrils flaring, tail stiff with purpose. The wind howled beneath the bridge, carrying with it the faint echo of a child's voice. Daniel followed the slope down, boots crunching on the ice. His flashlight cut through the darkness and stopped on a shape near one of the pillars. 2 small bodies huddled beside something larger. He quickened his pace. "Hey, it's okay. I'm a police officer," he called out, his voice barely rising above the storm. Ben flinched at the sound. His first instinct was to pull Emma behind him. But the light that reached them wasn't the glare of danger. It was steady, calm, accompanied by the soft sound of a dog barking once, short and sharp. Emma's eyes widened. "Ben, look," she whispered. Through the snow appeared Daniel, tall and broad, his navy uniform dusted white, his badge gleaming under the beam of his flashlight. Behind him, Shadow trotted, forward, sniffing the air, tail low in cautious curiosity. Daniel knelt as he approached, lowering his flashlight so it wouldn't blind them. Up close, he could see how young they were, just children, thin, exhausted, their faces red from the cold. The boy stood protectively in front of his sister, his hands balled into fists though they trembled. "It's all right," Daniel said softly. "I heard your call." Emma's lip quivered. "She's hurt." "Under there," she said, pointing at the motionless figure covered by Ben's torn coat. Daniel's breath caught when his light fell upon her face. The woman was pale, unconscious, her wrists bound with coarse rope. Even through the grime and frost, Daniel recognized her. "Chloe Bennett," he whispered. He remembered her from a year ago, a veterinarian from Cedar Hollow Clinic, slender, tall, with chestnut hair usually tied in a neat bun and sharp, kind eyes. She had been the one who operated on Shadow after the explosion that nearly killed them both. She'd stayed through the night back then, refusing to leave the clinic until the dog woke. "You owe that animal your life," she'd told him. And now here she was, broken, freezing beneath the bridge. Daniel snapped into action. "Shadow, stay," he ordered, then pulled his knife from its sheath and sliced through the ropes binding Chloe's wrists. Her skin was cold to the touch, but not lifeless. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. There, faint but steady, a pulse. "She's alive," he said quickly. "Good job, kids. You saved her." Ben exhaled, shoulders dropping in relief. Are we in trouble?" he asked, his voice shaking. Daniel looked up at him, seeing not defiance but fear, the kind that comes from being let down too many times. "No, son," he said gently. "Not tonight." He shrugged off his own coat and wrapped it around Chloe's shoulders. "Help's coming." Shadow barked once, ears pricked toward the road above. Moments later, the wail of sirens pierced the wind. Red and blue light spilled across the ice as 2 rescue vehicles pulled up on the bridge. Firefighters and medics swarmed down the slope, their voices cutting through the cold. Daniel lifted Chloe carefully, his breath ragged, and handed her to the paramedics waiting with a stretcher. "She's hypothermic," one medic said. "We need to get her warm now." Daniel nodded, then turned to the children. "You both okay?" Emma nodded quickly, eyes wide. Ben only gave a stiff shrug. "We're fine." His voice cracked, betraying the fear he was trying to hide. Daniel crouched down to meet his eyes. "What you did was brave," he said. "A lot of adults would have run." Emma glanced toward the ambulance as it pulled away, carrying Chloe into the night. "She'll live, right?" she asked, voice trembling. Daniel hesitated, glancing at Shadow. The dog looked up at him, tail flicking once, as if urging him to speak truth, wrapped in hope. "As long as there are good people like you two," he said softly. "She'll live." The wind shifted, carrying the fading sound of sirens away toward the hospital. Snowflakes glittered under the flashing lights, and for a brief moment Daniel felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Faith, maybe, or the fragile beginning of it. He led the children toward his patrol car. "Let's get you out of the cold," he said. Emma climbed in first, curling under a blanket Daniel found in the back seat. Ben hesitated, glancing at the dog. Shadow watched him steadily, unblinking. "He won't bite," Daniel said, "unless I tell him to." A flicker of humor crossed his face, and for the first time, Ben almost smiled. As the engine hummed to life, Daniel radioed in. "Unit 12. 1 female adult rescued. En route to Cedar Hollow General. 2 minors found at scene, unharmed." The dispatcher's voice replied, "Copy, Unit 12. Proceed to station for statements after hospital check." Shadow settled near the back, his head resting beside Emma's knee. She hesitated, then reached out and stroked the dog's fur. "He's warm," she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, he's the reason I'm still here." Outside, the storm began to ease. The worst had passed. Daniel drove in silence, the rhythmic sound of the wipers and the children's breathing filling the car. In the mirror, he could see Ben staring out the window, eyes distant. Something about that gaze, the quiet mix of fear and stubbornness, stirred an ache in Daniel's chest he didn't expect. He'd been that boy once, clutching responsibility too heavy for small shoulders. They arrived at the hospital as dawn began to break, a faint blue line across the horizon. Paramedics hurried Chloe inside while Daniel helped the children out of the car. He turned to the nurse waiting by the door, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense expression. "Get them warm, Fed," Daniel said. "They've been through hell." The nurse, Marla Jensen, gave him a curt nod. She was small but strong, with kind eyes hidden behind years of exhaustion. "Don't worry, officer. I've got them." She led the children away, Emma glancing back once before disappearing into the hallway's glow. Daniel lingered outside the emergency room doors. Through the window he could see Chloe surrounded by doctors, her face pale but alive. Shadow pressed against his leg, silent and steady. "You remember her, don't you?" he murmured. The dog's tail thumped once against the tile. Daniel knelt, scratching behind his ears. "You saved her once. Guess it's her turn now." The storm had quieted. Beyond the hospital's frosted windows, the first light of morning touched the snow, turning it silver. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt the weight on his heart ease. Just a little. He didn't know then that this night, this rescue, would bind their lives together in ways none of them could yet imagine. When Chloe Bennett opened her eyes, The world was a blur of light and muffled sound. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled her lungs, mixing with the faint rhythm of heart monitors. She blinked against the sterile glow until shapes began to take form. White curtains, a humming fluorescent lamp, and a vase of fading daisies perched near the window. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the memory returned, crashing like a wave. The bridge, the cold, the ropes biting into her wrists, and the children's voices calling for help. Her breath hitched, and panic flared through her chest. A nurse appeared at her bedside. It was Marla Jensen, the same woman who had admitted her hours earlier. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her expression was calm but firm. "Easy now," she said gently. "You're safe. You're at Cedar Hollow General." Chloe tried to sit up, but pain lanced through her shoulder. Marla steadied her with a practiced hand. "You were hypothermic and dehydrated. You're lucky to be alive." The door opened and Officer Daniel Reed stepped inside, his uniform still damp from melted snow. The exhaustion in his face was hidden beneath the disciplined calm he wore like armor. Beside him padded Shadow, the German shepherd, tail swishing softly. The dog approached the bed, sniffed Chloe's hand, and then rested his chin near her fingers with a low whine. Chloe's lips trembled. "Shadow," she whispered. The dog's eyes lifted to hers, and Daniel saw the first fragile smile break across her pale face. "You remember him," Daniel said quietly. "He remembers you, too." Chloe nodded weakly. "You shouldn't have found me," she murmured. "Whoever did this, they won't stop." Daniel pulled a chair closer. "Tell me what happened." She hesitated, eyes darting to the door as if afraid someone might be listening. "It started 3 weeks ago," she said finally. "I was called to assist the sheriff's office with medical checks on their K-9 units. Routine work, or so I thought. But when I looked at the blood tests, I found traces of something unnatural." Her voice trembled as she continued. "A neurochemical compound, an experimental suppressant. It dulls pain and emotion. It makes the dogs obey without hesitation, even at the cost of their own instincts. Whoever designed it wanted to erase fear and compassion." Daniel frowned, his jaw tightening. "And you confronted them?" Chloe nodded. "I brought it to Sheriff Rowan. I thought I was doing the right thing." Her eyes filled with tears. "He told me to stay quiet, said it was above his clearance. A day later, I was followed home. I started getting calls from blocked numbers. Then someone broke into my clinic. They took everything, the records, the samples. The night before you found me, I went back to my office to retrieve the last data file I'd hidden." Her hand trembled as she gestured, weakly, toward her side table. A small flash drive lay there, sealed inside a plastic evidence bag. I managed to send a copy to someone I trust before they caught me. "Who?" Daniel asked. "Pastor Graham," she said softly. "He's an old friend. He used to counsel officers after traumatic cases. He's kind, and he knows how to keep secrets." Daniel exchanged a glance with Shadow, who shifted uneasily. "We'll talk to him," Daniel said. "You did the right thing, Chloe. Rest now." But as he turned to leave, she reached for his sleeve. "Daniel," she whispered, "they're not just testing the dogs. They're using them to test us, to see how far obedience can be pushed." Her words followed him out into the hallway like a ghost. Outside the hospital, the morning light had turned the snow into a sheet of silver. Daniel stood for a moment, running a hand over his face. The world felt suddenly smaller, its shadows closer. Shadow nudged his leg, sensing his unease. "Yeah," Daniel muttered. "I feel it too." Meanwhile, across town, the doors of St. Mary's Chapel creaked open. Inside, Pastor Thomas Graham knelt by the altar, his hands clasped, lips moving in silent prayer. He was in his late 60s, tall but slightly stooped, his once dark hair now a soft halo of white. His eyes, pale blue and gentle, held the weariness of a man who had seen too much grief yet refused to stop believing in grace. He had buried soldiers, comforted widows, and once served as a counselor for first responders after the Black Ridge wildfire. That tragedy had taken his faith to the edge, but it had also taught him that miracles often came wearing ordinary faces. The quiet of the church broke when the door opened again. Marla entered, guiding two small figures wrapped in blankets. Emma and Ben followed hesitantly, their faces still pale but cleaner now, their bellies full for the first time in days. "Pastor Graham," Marla said, "these are the children from the bridge. Officer Reed thought they'd be safest here for the night." Graham's smile was warm and patient. "Then they are welcome," he said simply. He crouched to meet them at eye level. "You've both seen more of the world's cruelty than most grown men. But here," he gestured toward the candlelit nave, "the only thing you need to fear is running out of cookies." Emma giggled softly, though Ben only nodded. The boy's eyes were sharp, assessing. Graham recognized that look, the look of someone who had learned too soon that kindness could vanish without warning. "What are your names?" he asked gently. "Emma and Ben Carter," she replied. Graham's brow furrowed slightly at the surname, but he said nothing. Instead, he noticed the necklace Emma wore, a delicate silver snowflake pendant catching the candlelight. "That's a lovely piece," he said. "Where did you get it?" Emma looked down, fingering it. "I've always had it," she said. "The lady at the orphanage said it was mine when they found me." For the first time in years, Pastor Graham felt the breath catch in his chest. He remembered that necklace clearly. His late friend, Claire Reed, Daniel's wife, had donated several identical pendants to St. Mary's Orphan Fund a decade ago, each engraved with a tiny letter R on the back, for Reed. His heart pounded. He looked at Emma's face again, the curve of her nose, the light in her eyes. There was something hauntingly familiar there. "Would you like some cocoa?" he asked gently, hiding the tremor in his voice. She nodded eagerly. As he poured the warm drink, Graham's mind raced. Could it be possible? Daniel had never spoken much about the loss of his child after Claire's death, only that the baby hadn't survived the storm that claimed his wife's life. But the dates, the ages, they matched too closely. That evening, as the children fell asleep near the chapel stove, Graham sat alone in his office, the snowflake pendant glinting in his palm. He could almost hear Claire's laughter echoing from memory. "You're not gone," he whispered. "You just came home a different way." He opened his old laptop and checked his email. A new message sat in his inbox, sent the night before from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "In case I don't make it, CB." Attached was a single encrypted file. His heart sank. "Oh, Chloe," he murmured, "what have you stumbled into?" Graham plugged in the flash drive Daniel had handed him earlier. The two files were identical, coded and locked with the same symbol, a stylized serpent coiled around a trident. He'd seen that emblem before, back when he counseled officers from a classified division. It wasn't just scientific research, it was something darker, born from experiments meant to strip emotion from obedience. He leaned back in his chair, the candlelight flickering across his lined face. "Dear Lord," he whispered, "keep them safe, especially the ones who still believe." Outside, the bells of Cedar Hollow rang for evening service, their echoes drifting through the falling snow. Somewhere far away, Daniel Reed drove through the quiet streets, unaware that his past, his present, and the fragile miracle he thought he'd lost were all converging toward one truth, under the watchful eye of a man of faith and a woman who knew too much. The morning after Chloe's revelation broke like the slow lifting of a storm. The town of Cedar Hollow lay shrouded in mist, the snow having hardened into a glittering crust that crunched beneath the tires of Daniel Reed's patrol SUV. The world was silent, save for the low hum of the engine and the steady breathing of Shadow in the passenger seat. Daniel's jaw was tense, his eyes scanning the frozen landscape ahead. He had barely slept. Chloe's words from the hospital echoed in his mind. Obedience without emotion, chemical submission, dogs turned into tools. He felt the weight of it pressing against the steering wheel. Shadow shifted beside him, letting out a quiet rumble. The dog's thick fur was dusted with frost, his golden brown eyes fixed on the road, as if he too remembered the bridge, the fire, the woman they'd saved. Daniel reached out, scratching gently behind his ears. "One more trip, partner," he murmured. "We'll find what we missed." The German shepherd tilted his head, alert and ready. The bridge appeared through the fog like a scar across the frozen river. The burned vehicle had been cleared, but the smell of smoke lingered faintly in the air, mixed with rust and ice. Daniel parked near the guardrail and stepped out, the cold immediately biting through his gloves. He crouched near the riverbank where the ground was pitted with frozen footprints. The snow preserved a few faint impressions, wide, heavy treads. Military boots, not standard police issue. His breath fogged the air as he whispered, "You weren't alone out here, Chloe." Shadow sniffed along the embankment, tail low, body tense. The dog's movements were precise, his nose brushing over the snow until he stopped near a patch of disturbed earth. Daniel knelt beside him. Half buried in the ice lay a brass casing, dull but unmistakable. He brushed it free with gloved fingers, 90mm military grade, just as Chloe had warned. He held it up to the light and frowned. The rim of the casing was stained with a faint green residue. Chemical, not gunpowder alone. Before he could examine it further, Shadow growled, a deep, warning sound that vibrated through the air. Daniel froze, instinct taking over. The forest that lined the riverbank was quiet, but too quiet. Then came a sound, soft, distant, like the click of metal. His pulse spiked. "Down!" he shouted. A split second later, a shot cracked through the stillness. The bullet struck the bridge railing, shattering a chunk of ice into shards. Daniel rolled behind the patrol car, drawing his sidearm. Shadow barked fiercely, scanning the slope of the hill opposite the bridge. The shooter had the high ground. Daniel peered over the hood, searching the snow-covered ridge. Another flash, another shot. It skimmed the mirror, ricocheting into the river ice. Shadow lunged before Daniel could stop him, bounding through the snow toward the sound. "Shadow! No!" Daniel shouted, but the dog was already halfway up the slope. The sniper fired again. This time the bullet struck the rock beside Shadow, exploding it into a spray of ice and gravel. A shard of stone tore into the dog's shoulder. Shadow yelped but didn't stop. He turned, limping back down toward Daniel. Blood darkened the snow beneath his paw prints. Daniel ran to meet him, heart pounding. He knelt beside the dog, hands steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Easy, easy," he murmured. The wound was shallow but bleeding freely. He tore a strip from his undershirt and pressed it against the shoulder, binding it tightly. "You stupid, brave thing," he whispered, voice raw. As he adjusted the cloth, something caught his eye. The bullet hole in the patrol car door, surrounded by faint traces of a greenish chemical powder. He touched it with his glove, rubbed it between his fingers, and stared. "Sedative compound," he muttered. "Same damn one Chloe talked about." The shooter was gone by the time backup arrived. Only the cold wind answered the questions in Daniel's mind. He stayed a while longer, crouched beside Shadow before finally carrying the dog back to the car. "We're getting you to Chloe," he said quietly. "Hang in there, boy." At Cedar Hollow Veterinary Clinic, the smell of disinfectant and clean linen met them like an old memory. Chloe was there, still pale from her hospital stay, but back in her white coat, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp with concern. She had tied her hair into a messy bun, a few strands falling over her freckled cheeks. "What happened?" she asked, her voice tense as Daniel carried Shadow inside. "Sniper on the ridge," Daniel said shortly. "Shadow caught a rock splinter. Bullet residue's been treated with some kind of tranquilizer agent. Same as your test results." Chloe's hands trembled for half a second before she caught herself. "Put him on the table," she said firmly. Her professionalism kicked in like a second heartbeat. As she cleaned the wound, Shadow whimpered softly but didn't resist. "You're a good boy," she whispered, her tone softening. Daniel watched her movements, precise, methodical, but with a gentleness that seemed to calm even the air around them. When she finished bandaging the shoulder, she ran her fingers through Shadow's thick fur and stopped abruptly. "Wait." She parted the hair near the base of his neck. "Daniel, look at this." Embedded beneath the skin was a small circular device, metallic and crudely sewn in place, hidden beneath layers of scar tissue. Chloe's brow furrowed. "This isn't standard microchip placement. Someone implanted this manually." Daniel's eyes darkened. "You're saying someone tampered with his GPS?" "Yes," she said, reaching for her surgical tools. "It's been altered. See the soldering marks? Whoever did this cut the tracker apart and reattached it. The signal would have been rerouted, maybe even falsified." She removed the device carefully, laying it on a sterile tray. "This could explain why the patrol car's coordinates didn't match the scene the night I was taken. They hacked the dog's GPS feed to cover their tracks." Daniel's stomach sank. "That means they used him to lead me off route that night. They knew exactly where I'd go." Chloe nodded grimly. "They planned it all." She set the extracted device into a sealed plastic bag, labeling it with steady hands. "I'll send a copy of the data to Pastor Graham. He can store it safely off the grid." As she uploaded the encrypted files to her computer, the clinic filled with the faint hum of the heater and Shadow's slow breathing. Daniel stood by the window, watching the snow drift down outside. "Whoever's behind this, they're getting desperate," he said. "First the bridge, now a sniper. They're cleaning house." Chloe didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Shadow, then at Daniel, her voice quieter now. "When you looked at him under that bridge, did you ever think you were supposed to find us?" Daniel turned toward her, the question catching him off guard. "Supposed to?" "Sometimes," she said softly. "The things we stumble upon are the ones we were meant to see all along." Her eyes met his, steady and searching. For a heartbeat, the clinic felt almost warm. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The heater coughed and fell silent. Daniel straightened instantly, instincts sharp. "Power's out," Chloe frowned, moving toward the breaker box. "No storm warning today." She paused, glancing toward the front window. Beyond the frosted glass, a shape loomed. A car, black, idling in the snow. Its headlights were off, but the faint glow of a cigarette tip burned in the driver's seat. Someone was watching. "Daniel," she whispered, "we're not alone." He crossed the room quietly, hand going to his holster. Shadow lifted his head, a low growl rumbling from deep within his chest. Daniel parted the blinds just enough to see the dark vehicle parked across the street. As soon as he moved, the cigarette ember vanished, and the car's headlights flared to life. It reversed smoothly, disappearing into the fog. Chloe exhaled shakily, pressing a hand to her chest. "Whoever they are, they know where I am." Daniel lowered the blinds, his expression hard. "Then they know where I am, too." He turned toward her, voice low but steady. "You send that data to Graham tonight. After that, we move you somewhere safe." Shadow stood, limping slightly but ready. Outside, the snow fell harder, muffling the sound of retreating tires. The night around them felt alive with unseen eyes. Daniel looked at the wounded dog, the trembling woman, and the cold world beyond the window, and for the first time in years he realized how small the space between protection and danger truly was. The snow that night fell quietly over Cedar Hollow, soft as ashes. Inside St. Mary's Chapel, Pastor Thomas Graham sat at his old oak desk, the glow of the monitor flickering across his lined face. His fingers trembled as he attached the encrypted data file Chloe had sent him, the evidence of illegal canine experimentation that could expose an entire network of corruption. He typed slowly, double-checking the recipient. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Cybercrime Division. Then he whispered a short prayer. Let truth travel faster than darkness. Outside, the wind howled through the churchyard, rattling the stained glass windows. He didn't notice the faint hiss of liquid splashing against the wall or the faint scent of gasoline seeping through the cracks in the wooden floor. Someone moved in the shadows beyond the chapel's door. A tall man wearing a heavy coat, his breath ghosting in the air. In his gloved hand, he held a flare. When it struck the snow, the world erupted in red light. The explosion came without warning, a roar of heat and thunder. The flames leapt along the chapel's old timber beams, devouring the dry wood with terrifying speed. Pastor Graham was thrown from his chair, his glasses cracking on the floor. The computer sparked, the half-cent file freezing mid-transfer. Smoke filled the room, black and choking. Graham coughed, stumbling toward the pews, his vision blurred. "Dear Lord," he gasped, "not here. Not now." Miles away, Daniel Reed was driving through the back road toward the church when the radio crackled to life. All units, structure fire, St. Mary's Chapel, possible entrapment. He slammed the brakes. God, no. Without another thought, he hit the siren and turned hard onto the icy slope. Shadow barked sharply, sensing the urgency. "Hold on, partner," Daniel muttered, flooring the gas. By the time he arrived, the sky above Cedar Hollow glowed orange. Flames shot through the steeple like fingers reaching for heaven. Daniel jumped out of the car, pulling a fire blanket from the trunk. "Stay close, Shadow," he shouted. The dog leapt ahead, his silhouette cutting through the smoke. Through the shattered windows, Daniel could see movement inside. 2 small figures trapped near the nave. Ben and Emma. "Ben! Emma!" Daniel yelled, forcing his way through the side door. The heat struck him like a wall, searing his lungs. Shadow barked wildly, then bolted toward the sound of crying. He slammed against the locked nursery door, scratching frantically until the hinges gave way. Emma huddled in a corner, coughing, while Ben tried to drag her toward the window. "Get back!" Daniel shouted, smashing the glass with his elbow. "Go, Shadow!" The German shepherd lunged forward, teeth gripping Emma's coat. With a powerful pull, he dragged her toward the window opening. Daniel lifted the girl into the freezing air outside, then reached for Ben. "Come on, kid," he said hoarsely. Ben hesitated only long enough to grab the silver snowflake pendant from the table beside him before diving through the smoke. Daniel pushed him out just as the ceiling cracked above. A deep groan rippled through the burning beams. "Graham!" Daniel shouted, spinning toward the altar. The old pastor lay collapsed near the pulpit, half-conscious. His white hair was singed, his robe streaked with soot. Daniel grabbed him under the arms. "We're getting out of here," he grunted. Graham's voice was weak but calm. "The file. Daniel. It must reach them." Daniel coughed through the smoke. "It will, but not if you die here." They stumbled through the collapsing aisle, Shadow circling them, barking to guide the path. The roof groaned again, and flames rained down in bursts of molten wood. With a final lunge, Daniel burst through the front doors, falling into the snow as the steeple crashed behind them. The fire roared skyward, its reflection burning in Shadow's eyes. Paramedics arrived minutes later, pulling the children and the pastor toward the waiting ambulance. Graham gripped Daniel's hand tightly. The flash drive. Under the altar. Hidden compartment. His voice faded as oxygen masks descended. Daniel nodded grimly. "I'll get it." But as he turned back toward the burning church, the firefighters pulled him away. "It's too late, officer," one shouted. "The floor's gone." Daniel's heart pounded with frustration, but he knew the pastor was right. The data was their only proof, and someone had tried to destroy it. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement near the tree line. a dark figure running across the snow, lit briefly by the fire's glow. Daniel's instincts flared. He drew his flashlight and gun, sprinting after the man. "Police! Stop!" he shouted, boots crunching through the snow. The stranger didn't stop. He moved with practiced agility, cutting through the forest path. When Daniel finally caught up, he aimed the beam forward and froze. Standing before him, coat dusted with ash, was Sheriff Miles Rowan. The man's face was hard, angular, his graying beard rhymed with frost. His cold blue eyes betrayed no surprise. Rowan was tall, powerfully built, the kind of man whose authority filled a room even before he spoke. "Put the gun down, Daniel," he said evenly. Daniel's voice was a growl. "You were there. You set that fire." Rowan's expression didn't change. "You should have stayed out of this." His tone was quiet, almost pitying. "You think you can fight the people funding this program? You think you can save those kids? You're one man with a broken dog and a bleeding conscience." Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. "You used them, those animals, those officers for experiments, and you tried to kill Chloe." The sheriff sighed, the kind of sound that came from a man who believed himself untouchable. "I didn't try. I ordered it." His eyes hardened. "The program keeps order, Daniel. Emotion gets men killed. Loyalty without fear. Imagine what that could mean for control." Before Daniel could respond, headlights flared behind Rowan. The sheriff turned sharply and fired once into the air. Daniel dove behind a tree, snow exploding beside him. When he looked again, Rowan was gone, swallowed by the forest's shadows. By dawn, the fire was out. St. Mary's Chapel stood in ruins, smoke curling into the pale sky. Ben and Emma were safe under medical care. Graham was alive but unconscious, and Shadow lay resting beside the ambulance, his bandaged shoulder rising and falling with slow breaths. Daniel leaned against his car, staring at the horizon. His radio crackled suddenly. "Dispatch to Unit 12. FBI reports contact lost with Dr. Chloe Bennett. Last signal near Hollow Ridge Pass." He closed his eyes, dread sinking like lead. He understood now. The enemy wasn't just inside his department. It was sitting in the sheriff's chair. Rowan had ordered every fire, every silence. And now Chloe was in his path. Daniel looked down at Shadow, who raised his head, eyes sharp despite the pain. "We're not stopping now," Daniel whispered. "Not till she's safe." The wind carried away his words, mingling with the smell of burnt cedar and snow, the scent of a war just beginning. The blizzard had returned with a vengeance, swallowing Cedar Hollow in a storm of white fury. The wind screamed through the pines, bending them like bowing giants, and the frozen river below the steel bridge groaned beneath the weight of gathering ice. Flashing blue lights from patrol cars painted the storm in haunting colors far away, but here, beneath the bridge, only darkness reigned. Chloe Bennett stumbled as the sheriff shoved her forward. Her wrists were bound, her lips split and bleeding, the cold gnawing at her bones. Sheriff Miles Rowan towered behind her, his coat flapping like a torn banner in the wind. His face, illuminated by the faint gleam of a flashlight, looked carved from stone. Gray beard dusted with frost, eyes glacial and pitiless. "I never wanted it to come to this," he said, voice steady, as if reciting an oath. "You forced my hand when you gave them the data." Chloe's breath fogged the air. "You burned a church," she rasped. "You tried to kill children." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Collateral. The world doesn't change without blood." He raised his pistol, the black barrel gleaming. "Now, Doctor, where is the backup drive?" Before Chloe could answer, the sound of a distant engine cut through the howling wind. Headlights flared on the ridge above. Rowan's expression hardened. "He came," he muttered. "Of course he came." Officer Daniel Reed stepped out of his vehicle, the snow pelting his jacket, his revolver gripped tightly. Shadow padded at his side, the German shepherd's breath steaming in the cold, one shoulder still wrapped in a bandage from the previous wound. The dog's eyes gleamed with fierce intelligence. Daniel scanned the scene. One hostage, one shooter, and the bridge where everything had begun. "Let her go, Rowan," Daniel shouted over the wind. "It's over." The sheriff's voice came back calm and cold. "You think you can stop this by killing me? You have no idea how deep it goes, Daniel. You've been a pawn since day one." Daniel took a cautious step forward, his boots sinking into the snow. "You were my mentor," he said, voice rough. "You taught me that loyalty meant protecting the innocent. What happened to that?" Rowan smiled, a grim twist of bitterness. "I learned loyalty isn't enough. Control is cleaner." He cocked the gun, pressing it to Chloe's temple. "You take one more step, she dies." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The wind screamed between the girders, and the river below cracked with an echo like distant thunder. Then, from the snow, Shadow began to growl, a low, primal sound that carried through the storm. Daniel whispered, "Easy, boy." But the dog's gaze never left the sheriff. Rowan turned his gun toward Daniel. "I said don't move." The gun fired. Shadow leapt. The bullet tore through the air, and in the blink of an eye the dog was between them. The shot hit him high on the chest. He yelped, momentum, carrying him into Rowan's legs, knocking the sheriff backward. Chloe screamed as Daniel fired twice, sharp, deafening cracks that shattered the storm's rhythm. Rowan staggered, clutching his side, and collapsed into the snow. Daniel dropped to his knees beside Shadow. Blood bloomed like dark ink against the white. "No, no. Stay with me," he whispered, pressing his hands over the wound. The dog's chest rose and fell unevenly, eyes half open, struggling to focus. Chloe crawled toward them, her hands shaking as she tore off her scarf to make a makeshift bandage. "He's still breathing," she said through tears. "I can stop the bleeding. Just hold him still." Her voice cracked with desperation. "You hear me, sweetheart? You don't get to give up now." She pressed the fabric tight, her tears falling into the snow. "You saved us all. You're my brave boy." Daniel's eyes burned. The wind howled around them, and for a moment, time itself seemed to stop. He brushed a trembling hand over Shadow's fur. "You did good, partner," he whispered. A faint voice crackled from Daniel's radio. "Unit 12, we're en route. ETA 5 minutes." But the static swallowed the rest. On the ridge above, two small figures emerged through the storm. Ben and Emma, bundled in oversized coats, clutching a broken police radio they'd scavenged from the rescue trucks. They had run from the medical tent the moment they saw the patrol lights fade toward the bridge. When the first gunshot echoed through the valley, Emma gasped. "Ben, it's him!" Ben dropped to his knees in the snow, twisting the radio knobs until the light blinked green. "This is—" His voice cracked. "This is Ben Carter. Officer Reed needs help at the frozen bridge. Please, hurry." The static hissed, but then came a response. "Copy that. Rescue units inbound." Down below, Daniel stood unsteadily, weapon still drawn. Rowan was alive, but fading fast, blood staining the snow beneath him. The sheriff's breath came in ragged bursts. "You think this ends with me?" he rasped. "They'll bury this. They'll bury you." Daniel's expression was cold, resolute. "Then I'll dig until there's nothing left to hide." He kicked Rowan's gun away and turned back to Chloe, who was cradling Shadow's head in her lap. Sirens pierced the night, distant but growing louder. Blue and red light reflected off the ice, painting the dying bridge in ghostly hues. Chloe pressed her forehead to Shadow's, whispering through her tears. "You're not leaving us. Not now. You promised." Daniel crouched beside her, resting a blood-streaked hand on the dog's paw. The faintest tremor of movement answered him, the weak wag of a tail beneath the snow. He exhaled a shaky laugh. "That's my boy." The sirens reached them at last. Emergency lights flared across the bridge, bathing the scene in harsh color, blue, red, and white, mixing with the endless snow. Paramedics rushed forward. One of them, a young woman with dark curls and steady hands, knelt beside Chloe. "We've got him," she said gently. "He's still with us." Chloe stepped back, hands trembling and slick with blood. Daniel helped her to her feet, wrapping his arm around her shoulders as they watched Shadow being lifted onto a stretcher. The storm had softened, snow falling slower now, as if the night itself were finally exhaling. Far above, Ben and Emma stood side by side, their small figures silhouetted against the flashing lights. The girl's pendant caught the glow, a silver snowflake glimmering like a star. Below them, Daniel looked up, meeting their eyes through the drifting snow. For the first time in years, he smiled. Not the weary, guarded smile of a man burdened by loss, but one filled with something rare and fragile. Hope. The bridge that had once borne witness to darkness now gleamed with light, the last bridge between despair and redemption, standing against the storm. The winter in Cedar Hollow had softened into something gentler. The blizzards had gone, leaving behind a pale sky and fields of melting snow. The river beneath the bridge no longer groaned but sang again, water threading through cracks of thawing ice. A month had passed since that night, the night of gunfire, smoke, and redemption. Now, for the first time in years, the town felt like it could breathe again. In the courthouse of Missoula County, the verdict echoed through the chamber. Miles Rowan, life imprisonment without parole. The former sheriff, once the symbol of order and discipline, stood expressionless as the gavel fell. His hair had grayed fully, his jaw set in stone. There was no remorse in his eyes, only the hollow defiance of a man who had built his own prison long before the bars closed around him. Outside the courthouse, journalists jostled for a glimpse of Chloe Bennett, now hailed as the whistleblower who had uncovered the illegal K-9 experiments and pharmaceutical smuggling operation. She wore a navy coat, her auburn hair pinned neatly, her face calm despite the storm of cameras. "I didn't do this alone," she told the reporters softly. "Without Officer Reed, Shadow, and 2 brave children, I wouldn't be standing here." At the veterinary wing of Cedar Hollow General, Shadow lay on a recovery bed, his fur shaved along one side, the faint scar beneath wrapped in clean bandages. His eyes were bright again, tail thumping lazily against the blanket as Daniel knelt beside him. The officer's uniform had been replaced with a simple wool sweater, his rugged face softened by relief. "You never make it easy, do you, partner?" he murmured, rubbing the dog's muzzle. Shadow whined gently and pressed his head into Daniel's chest, the warmth between them stronger than any metal. Later that week, a ceremony was held at the town square. The sky was clear, sunlight glittering on the frosted rooftops. Daniel stood among his colleagues, straight-backed as the mayor pinned the Medal of Valor to his chest. The applause that followed was sincere, but when he turned to look at the crowd, his eyes caught something else entirely. 2 small figures standing beside Pastor Graham, their hands clasped tightly. Ben and Emma Carter, dressed in clean winter coats, watched him with shy pride. After the ceremony, Graham approached, his kind eyes shining behind his spectacles. "They've been waiting to see you," he said, his voice soft as snow. Daniel crouched down, meeting the children's gaze. Ben, always protective, stood half a step in front of Emma. The boy's blonde hair had been trimmed, his blue eyes steady but uncertain, as if he wasn't used to safety yet. Emma's auburn hair was tied in a loose braid, and around her neck, the silver snowflake pendant glimmered in the sunlight. Daniel swallowed hard. "You two did something very brave," he said. "You helped save lives." Emma's lips curved into a small smile. "You saved us first," she whispered. Graham watched quietly, the weight of a secret in his eyes. That evening, when Daniel brought the children to his cabin near the woods, the pastor finally told him the truth. The pendant Emma wore was one of several donated years ago by Claire Reed, Daniel's late wife, to the orphanage fund. "They came from her," Graham said. "From her heart, really. Maybe it's not blood that binds us, Daniel, but grace." Daniel sat long after the children had fallen asleep by the fire. The truth felt like a circle closing, a gift from a life he thought he had lost, returned to him in the form of two small souls. He looked at the photo of Claire on the mantel and whispered, "You found your way back, didn't you?" Shadow stirred beside him, resting his head on Daniel's knee. The dog's amber eyes flickered in the firelight, as if understanding. Spring began to touch the town in pale greens and golds. Chloe moved into a small house near Daniel's cabin, her clinic rebuilt with community donations. Her days were full again, patching fences, treating animals, and checking on Shadow, who had fully recovered and insisted on following Daniel everywhere. Her laughter, once rare, now filled the mornings. Daniel found himself drawn to it, quietly grateful for the light it brought back into the woods. One morning, the sun rose over Cedar Hollow like a promise. The town gathered at the newly rebuilt bridge, the same bridge that had once been a place of fire and fear. Fresh steel gleamed beneath the light, the snow on its rails beginning to melt. Pastor Graham stood at the center, Bible in one hand, the other resting gently on Emma's shoulder. Daniel, Chloe, Shadow, Ben, and Emma stood together before the small plaque that had been fixed into the rail. The engraving read, "Where the dark once fell, kindness rose again." Graham's voice carried over the quiet river. "God doesn't always thunder," he said. "Sometimes he whispers, through the kindness of people." His words hung in the cold air like a prayer. Daniel felt something stir deep within him, a peace he hadn't known since the day he'd lost Claire. Shadow lay between Ben and Emma, tail flicking lazily as they petted his fur. Chloe stood beside Daniel, her gloved hand brushing against his. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time there was no weight of the past, only the gentle certainty of the present. "Ready to go home?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded, his voice thick with quiet emotion. "Yeah," he said. "Home sounds right." As they turned toward the path leading back into the woods, the sunlight broke fully through the clouds, scattering across the river like shards of gold. The bridge behind them gleamed, a symbol not of endings but of beginnings. Proof that even after fire and snow, some places and some hearts could be rebuilt. And for the first time in years, Cedar Hollow felt alive again. Sometimes God's greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or lightning. They come quietly, through the love we give, the kindness we choose, and the courage we share with those beside us. The bridge in Cedar Hollow was once a place of darkness, yet it became a path of light, reminding us that even in our hardest days, grace still finds a way. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel to help more souls find hope again. And tonight, may God bless you and your loved ones. May He guard your home, your heart, and every small act of compassion you give, for through them His miracles continue to live among us.